When World War II ended, the face of Europe had once again changed. Three years had passed since the fighting ended. There were housing and food shortages. But Germany was rebuilding. Germany was also geographically divided. Troops of the United States, Britain, and France occupied the western portion of the country. The Soviet Union controlled the eastern portion. Berlin, encircled by the Soviet zone, was a divided city. For more than 2 million people living within Berlin, daily necessities were in limited supply. Shipments of new supplies arrived from the west by barge, rail, and truck. For several months, tensions had been building between the Western and Eastern leadership. The latest issue concerned the creation and control of a post-war currency for Germany. It would be this issue that created gridlock. The Soviet Union, unable to dictate the currency policy, stopped all land, rail, and water access into the city. Berlin was suddenly a city held hostage, isolated, and seemingly inaccessible from the Western zone. However, in 1945, the four powers had established by formal agreement 3 20-mile wide air bridges, or corridors, connecting Berlin to the west. The immediate Allied response? Airlift emergency supplies to Berlin using the established corridors. The U.S. Air Force and Royal Air Force quickly pressed the versatile C-47 into service. Unfortunately, European-based airlift capability quickly proved inadequate for breaking the Russian blockade. If airlift was to be successful, there had to be extensive build-up and reorganization of Allied resources and capability. The United States Air Force, not yet a year old, began moving larger C-54s and experienced personnel from all over the world to Germany. Exacting airlift procedures were developed quickly. For example, within the corridor, aircraft were vertically separated by 500 feet and horizontally by 3 minutes. All aircraft were directed by radio and radar control. Soon, tons of life-sustaining supplies began arriving in Berlin. Coal for industry and flour for bread. Seagoing tankers delivered millions of gallons of aviation gasoline for the growing airlift fleet. The tonnage flown into Berlin increased steadily. As the winter of 1948 approached, the leadership on both sides knew that weather would be the airlift's critical test. During the winter months, adverse weather conditions hindered and often halted flight operations. The airlift, however, continued, except during extreme weather conditions. Aircraft arrived in Berlin on the average of 1 plane every 3 minutes. The constant stream of aircraft demanded strict adherence to established procedures and extensive maintenance and logistic support. Air traffic controllers and ground control approach personnel were the unsung heroes of the airlift. When winter gave way to spring, it was obvious the airlift was working. Supplies were being stockpiled. Seeing children around the airfield, air crews dropped chocolate and gum by handkerchief parachutes. During April 1949, a maximum airlift effort known as the Easter Parade began. This effort clearly demonstrated the airlift had broken the siege and the Russian blockade of Berlin had failed. The Soviet Union officially lifted the blockade on May 12, 1949. Berlin was no longer held hostage. The greatest humanitarian airlift ever attempted was now history.